Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
In a story that broke this afternoon, CNN reports that Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe is under a federal investigation for campaign contributions. Now, this is not unusual. What's unusual is that friends of the Clintons are even pointing out the corruption. It's become so obvious. We talk about CNN often as being the Clinton news network. They say Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe is the subject of an ongoing investigation by the FBI, and prosecutors from the Justice Department's Public Integrity Unit, U.S. officials briefed on the probe say. The investigation dates to at least last year and is focused at least in part on whether donations to his gubernatorial campaign violated the law, say officials. Investigators have scrutinized McAuliffe's time as a board member of the Clinton Global Initiative, a vehicle of charitable foundation set up by former President Bill Clinton. Now, understand who this guy is for those of you who aren't in Virginia. First of all, Terry McAuliffe was a banker. Then from there, he became Bill Clinton's co-chair of his campaign. Then he became DNC chair. Then he became Hillary Clinton's campaign manager. Then he became governor of Virginia. So he's a party apparatchik. And like these Clinton people and the DNC, we need to remember that going back into the 90s and in the early 2000s, we had massive scandals involving, guess what? Selling influence to some of the same people that he's suspected of selling influence to here. Remember that by the end of the second Clinton term, there were 21 people who had been found guilty of making illegal campaign contributions to the Clintons. And the way they would like to do that frequently is to run it through these charitable foundations. Of course, one of the most famous was Johnny Chung, who pled guilty. He showed up one day in Hillary Clinton's office with a check for $50,000. Now, he copped a plea, and all he got was probation. The Clintons didn't go to jail either. So why would Terry McAuliffe then feel like he has to abide by any ethics regulations? Now, the bottom line is that you've got a situation here where a guy who puts in that kind of money, and of course there were many instances like this of influence peddling by the Clintons. Nobody went to jail, and yet look at what they did to Dinesh D'Souza, who was not expecting anything in return for the money that he donated to a former college friend who was running for political office. But because he gave more than the maximum amount out of naivete, they sent him to jail, and he served real time, but not these guys, not Johnny Chung and not these people. Okay, now Chung even said that he used his political access to get business deals from investors in China, and that was part of his plea bargaining. So it all comes out, mistakes were made, but nobody goes to jail. Now, what is going on with Terry McAuliffe? As they point out, among the donations that drew interest from the investigators was $120,000 from a Chinese businessman. No, not Johnny Chung, but a guy named Wang. Now, Wang was previously a delegate to China's National People's Congress, okay, their ceremonial legislature, because their government is really run by just a few guys. And so I guess we could start saying that our Congress is ceremonial. It really doesn't make any decisions. It's now done by the executive along with the bureaucracies. They regulate everything. Wang has also been a donor to the Clinton Foundation and pledged $2 million, but nothing to see. Just move along. Now, what all this gets for you, and as I point out, we've got a ceremonial legislature ourselves. The regulations are coming from the bureaucracy. It is legislation without representation. Look at this article here. 20,642 new regulations added during the Obama presidency. More than $22 billion per year in new regulatory costs were imposed on Americans last year, pushing the total burden for the Obama years to exceed $100 billion per year. Now, that's the regulatory cost. They say this is $1 for every star in the galaxy, 1 for every second in 32 years. Now, some of the things in which they've affected our lives, the way this red tape costs us, they point out is restricted access to credit because of the Dodd-Frank bill that was supposed to regulate the banks, but instead it regulates individuals. Fewer healthcare choices, of course, reduced internet investment and innovation, and the Clean Power Act, which by itself will add $7.2 billion per year. Now, that doesn't include things like this effort by the EPA to impose millions of dollars in fines on an individual rancher because he had 8 acres and he put a small stock pond there that was approved by the state and local government. But then the EPA comes in and says, no, we own that. They put $37,000 a day in fines on him. He eventually beat that rap. But where is this compensation? Where is the regulation? Where is the mechanism by which we can control this out-of-control bureaucracy? And as we pointed out last week, Boris Johnson, the mayor of London, talked about Brexit, and he said, look, here's 8 really strong and different reasons, not just immigration, folks. That's what the Washington Post likes to talk about, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But he said, look at the cost that we have. We're having to send from Britain to the European Union $500,000 a week. And what do we get for that? Well, we get about 2,500 regulations. If you look at these regulations from the EPA, that's about 2,950 regulations that we're getting from them. Of course, we get 80,000 pages of regulations each year, but in their accounting, they have 2,900 on average, 2,950 throughout the 7 years of Obama, just under 3,000 regulations, but we pay more than that. Just from Texas alone, we are paying 3 times what Britain does, and yet our economy is half the size of Britain. So we're paying 6 times what they're paying, and we're getting more regulations. We're getting 3,000 instead of 2,500. So that's just one reason for Britain to leave the EU. It's another reason for Texas to leave the United States, because we can't get them to leave us alone. But look at the way the Washington Post spends it. And of course, the Washington Post is losing all of its little bit of credibility that it had left. Lately, they have gone on a spree of misrepresenting not only Donald Trump, but now the British leave, the Brexit movement. They say immigration backlash is at the heart of the British push to leave the European Union. And they say the anti-EU campaign's emphasis on metaphorically walling off the British Isles, and in some cases demonizing immigrants as criminals, addicts, or as welfare cheats, has generated comparisons to the xenophobia and the nativism of another political movement that is shaking the Western political establishment this year. They say it is a transatlantic mirror of Donald Trump's program. Well, here's the commonality between the two. It fundamentally is not about xenophobia and racism. That's their arguing tactic. No, it is really a question of globalism versus nationalism. Are they going to destroy the sovereignty and local governance of these states that we have had that created the European Union? Or are we going to have a concentration? That's what is really at stake behind all of this. And of course, as one person that they talked to said, we have an old-fashioned view that the best people to run Britain are the British. That shouldn't be a radical concept. You see, it's about local government, it's about local control versus consolidation of power into one point where just a few people tell everyone else how to manage their economy and destroy individual sovereignty. Look at what's happening in Austria. There was a massive pushback, and of course, with an election as close as this Austrian election was, there is a high concern, pretty much a certainty, that it was rigged. But this is what the winning Green Party socialist says. Whoever loves Austria is shit, he says. Now, this is coming from an ad campaign that they had back in 2007. The Austrian Greens had a picture of a dog with an Austrian flag in its mouth with a poster said, "Take your flag for your gag," followed by the declaration that anyone who loves the country must be shit. They say the flag joke was a play on a campaign urging dog owners to place their dog's excrement in bags and in trash cans. They say it wasn't simply a gag or one-off incident, however. They said more recently, a leading green activist said, Austria is a lousy piece of shit when discussing the country's recent border controls to deal with Europe's migrant crisis. And they also point out that this guy who hates the sovereignty of Austria is the son of Russian aristocrats. Okay? This is why we have the natural-born citizen requirements in the Constitution. We can argue over the letter of the law. I think it's not that obscure. But the intent is to make sure that we don't have our countries, our cultures destroyed by people who come in without not only any respect for our laws by coming in, but who come in such large numbers that they not only don't wish to assimilate, but they wish to deconstruct our country. Look at what the Pope is doing. We've pointed out this every day. The Pope does something else that is not involved with religion, not involved with Christianity, but is involved with politics. Today, he met with the top imam, and he embraced Islam in a historic Vatican meeting. Pope Francis embraced the Grand Imam of Cairo, their largest mosque there, the Al-Azhar Mosque at the Vatican on Monday. This man is the highest authority in Sunni Islam, and the Pope said, our meeting is the message. In other words, the message you should take away from this meeting is that we are meeting here. We're having a peace conference. There he is again, crying peace, peace, when there is no peace. He says we need to take a joint stance. We need hand in hand to bring happiness to humanity. Divine religions were revealed to make people happy, not to cause them hardship. Well, okay, I have to ask, is this what Islam imposes? Does it impose any hardship, or is it just there to make people happy? Is it making Christians in Saudi Arabia happy? Is it making women happy when it oppresses them? Is it making gays happy when it throws them off of roofs? See, the problem with this is the fact that the Pope, as we pointed out last week, has criticized our efforts in the West to try to bring democracy and tolerance to Islamic countries, while he praises Muslims who come here. He has nothing to say about Jesus, and yet what he represents is a merging of religion and politics, because all the Pope talks about is politics. How he can deconstruct Western society, deconstruct free markets, and impose a global world governance on what we do here. And so yet we see yet another example of that. And look at what Obama does when he sells us his religion. We've got Obama appointing a transgender person to an advisory faith council. This person is David Satin. And I have to look at this and I say, well, first of all, besides appointing a transgender person to his advisory faith council, why would we have an advisory faith council from the American government? I thought we were supposed to have this wall of separation, the liberals tell us, between church and state. So why do we have an advisory faith council as a federal government function? Why do they get involved at all? See, the wall of separation was supposed to wall in the federal government. That phrase is not in the Constitution. It's not in the Bill of Rights. It was simply a letter that Thomas Jefferson sent to some people who were concerned that he was going to come around and confiscate their Bibles. That's what John Adams was telling people during the campaign. And so he said, no. There is a wall of separation between the government and you. In other words, the government is walled in. And yet now we have the government selling us its values, propagating its values, threatening to take school lunches away from poor children if we don't allow their transgender tyranny, as we see from Barack Obama. And that's precisely what we're seeing from the Pope. You know, going back to this meeting here, he said he presented this imam, who is the highest imam of Sunni religion, with a copy of his recent encyclical, a letter to the faithful, in which he urges the world to wake up to the threat posed by climate change and economic inequality. You see, it is a merging of religion and state that makes what the Pope is doing so dangerous. It is a merging of religion and state, which is what makes Islam dangerous. And it is a merging of Obama's social engineering as if it were a religious value that makes what he is doing so dangerous. This is the key here. And he adds that the imam wants to promote true Islam. Well, true Islam is really a merging of church and state. Where are the people who have a problem with that in the liberal agenda? Now, look at this last story here. We have a security guard who was arrested in Washington, D.C. She was arrested for removing a man from a women's bathroom. A female security guard working at a Washington, D.C. grocery store was arrested Monday afternoon, this last Monday, for physically escorting a woman out of the woman's room after he refused to leave because he identifies himself as a woman, he says. Now, they said this was a suspected hate crime. In other words, it was hateful for this female security guard to remove this man out of the restroom because she perceived him as a threat, as an affront. He says that he was emotionally traumatized by the incident. Do we care if women and children are emotionally traumatized by men going into the restrooms because they feel like it? We don't care about the vast majority of people. No, for this transgender tyranny, we are going to let the small minority lord it over everyone else. And he says, the security guard told him, you guys cannot keep coming in here and using our women's restroom. They did not pass the law yet. See, that's the problem. They really don't care what women and young girls believe about this, how they feel about this. They don't want to protect them or even have any concern about their emotional trauma about this. All right, stay with us. When we come back from break, Jakari Jackson has a special report on sex trafficking, and we're going to cover what's being called the gun apocalypse in California, sweeping regulations that will control even ammunition. Maybe we should call it Ammogeddon. We'll be right back.
A lot of people ask me, what is the most important area of Infowars that runs the whole operation that is having such a big effect against the globalists? And I've said it over and over again, it is you, the listeners and the viewers, that send us the intel, the news tips, that support the broadcast, that spread the word. You are 90% of the operation or more. You don't stand beside us, you stand at the heart of Infowars. When I talk about the people at Infowars, from customer service, the shipping department, being just as important as our anchors, our researchers, our investigative journalists, and myself, it's absolutely true. Without this team that we've built over the last 20 plus years, we wouldn't be able to do any of what we've been doing. And that's what's so exciting, because we finally built up to a point where we now have the launch pad. Introducing AutoShip for InfoWarsLife.com, a new way to save time and money when you stock up on InfoWarsStore.com products. Again, ladies and gentlemen, when products are sold out, you're unable to get them, sometimes for months, but we hold back the products for people that have already signed up for AutoShip. When you choose AutoShip before checkout on your order at InfoWarsStore.com, we'll give you 10% off and give you guaranteed delivery of out-of-stock products that are on your AutoShip list. Plus, we're giving you free shipping on all orders above $50. Listeners have been requesting this for years because it's so easy to forget to reorder the products when you need them each month. Now it's finally here. AutoShip at InfoWarsStore.com and InfoWarsLife.com. It's easy. Go to InfoWarsStore.com, select your favorite product, click on the AutoShip, and choose how often you want us to send you another order. As you know, I coined the term 360 win, and with the new AutoShip feature at InfoWarsLife.com, it's a sure win. You add to that free shipping on orders of $50, it is a can't lose. Visit InfoWarsStore.com and save 10% off on your next InfoWars Life order by selecting AutoShip at checkout, and get free shipping on all orders above $50. That's InfoWarsStore.com, or call toll-free 888-253-3139.